So, a quick quiz before today's podcast begins. What do I and all of my guests have in common? The answer is Gigio. It's a web-based software designed for professional entertainers that takes all of the stress out of admin. We manage our inquiries, generate PDF contracts and invoices, and track our payments with software that's quick to set up and really easy to use. If you're serious about your magic business, it really is the only option to ensure your business runs perfectly. Read what others are saying about it and take a free 30-day trial at gigio.co.uk. That's Gigio, spelled Gigio.co.uk.
You're listening to the Magicians Podcast. Informal interviews with the biggest names in magic.
And I'm your host, Richard Young. If you're listening to us on iTunes or Podbean, please do remember to press the subscribe button. That way you'll be alerted as and when we upload new episodes. You can also keep in touch with what we're up to on Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, just search for The Magicians Podcast. Hopefully you'll find us that way. And on Twitter, our handle is @MagicianPodcast, no S, @MagicianPodcast. The word legend in magic is often used, but never is it more appropriate than for my next guest. Fay Presto has been performing close-up magic in this country for over 30 years. She is also currently, along with myself, one of the featured performers on the touring show Champions of Magic. I met with Fay at Dave Bonsel's Prop Dog to find out all about her journey in this business. So you were telling me earlier that you live in the home that you grew up in.
Yeah, and very rare for a Londoner. My mum and dad moved into this flat, very elegant sort of mansion block flat. My mum moved in before the war, and she got married and they stayed on. It was one of these sort of rented flats with but it slowly sort of degraded over the years, and then the council bought them. And then I bought it under right to buy. I mean, it was a tiny flat for 6 people to live in. It was a nightmare. But it's very nice for one.
One of your most famous, I think people will be aware of, is that you've got residency in Langhams.
Yeah.
And that's been 30 years you've been there now?
I think it's coming up to 35.
And how has it changed over the years working there?
Well, when it was the place to go, when Michael Caine was very involved in it, it was a restaurant started by Michael Caine and a bloke called Peter Langan, who gave it his name, and a chef called Richard Shepherd. And they started this restaurant on, I guess it must have been Michael's money and Richard's cooking and Peter Langan's sort of style. And it was wall-to-wall celebrities. You would not believe. I mean, I used to write down the people I performed to, and people thought I was making it up. It was Sammy Davis Jr. and Sinatra used to go in there. It was extraordinary. It was, and of course, as soon as there was a first night or a premiere, it was rammed. Cagney and Lacey were in there. Everybody. It was, and in the end, I had to stop sort of writing down the names of the people that I performed to because it looked stupid. And it has had a very long life for a London restaurant to still be going 35 years later and still be pretty full is remarkable. It's not. Obviously, it's not the. I mean, other restaurants come along, and the Wolsey took over, and the Ivy took over, and the Berners Hotel takes over for a while. But this place is haunted, but it still has a clientele, and still some of the original people still go back in there. So I still get good work from it.
Is it still the main source of your income?
Oh God, no.
No.
You make nothing from a restaurant.
I mean, in terms of work being generated.
No, it keeps your profile up and it keeps you in the public eye, and a certain amount of my new work comes from there. But an awful lot of my work, I would think 85% of my work is repeat or personal recommendation. Very little comes in from the website, or if they haven't seen me work, probably won't use me. And a lot of work comes in from that, because I give it out a lot of cards. But you also need other sources. I'd like to find another residency.
And so what was your route into it? To get to where we are today, obviously started somewhere. What was your pre-magic?
I needed
living?
to eat.
You needed to eat?
Yeah, I don't much like magic. I love what it'll do. I'd been working as a motorcycle messenger, delivering parcels around London, and that is a very dangerous job. And my original background was in selling. From school, I found myself working in a laboratory, washing test tubes, which wasn't very fulfilling. Then I staggered into a retail job, working behind the counter of a yacht chandlery, and from there I moved into technical sales. I was selling adding machines. Recently, a little while ago, it was double glazing. Then it was timeshares. There's always something coming out on the market where they need cannon fodder. They will take anybody who is not qualified. At the moment, it's chugging. You can't walk down the house street without somebody coming up to you, trying to sell you, or trying to persuade you to give them a standing order for a charity. And back then, it was adding machines and calculators, because we had just decimalised. So you could get a job as a sales rep, as long as you could walk and carry a briefcase. They'd take you on, take anybody on. And so I sold adding machines.
How do you go from that to being a magician?
Well, then it gets slightly more technical, and they invent the computer, and you go, oh, my brain won't handle this. So I then staggered into selling forklift truck spare parts. It was a company that wasn't really good at supplying spare parts. It was British Leyland, and they needed people to keep going down to the factory and finding the spare parts and delivering to the customers. And from there I got into selling them. And then I had, it might have been a nervous breakdown, I don't know. I have a theory about nervous breakdowns. I think you only have one if there's someone there to catch you. And there was no one to catch me, but I picked myself up, and the only job I could find was delivering parcels around London on the back of a motor scooter. And from there I needed out. And I looked around and I thought, maybe I'll try the entertainment industry. I couldn't sing a note. I was 35, I was too old to dance. And the acting profession was full of unemployed actors. I saw a man in half. There must be enough people on this planet who would like to see someone saw a man in half. There weren't.
So that was literally your first foray into magic, was at the age of 35?
35, I'd never done anything. I'd never performed. I was always in the stage crew at school, hammering things together. And I didn't even know whether it was possible to get through a performance without dying from nervous. At the time, Covent Garden had just stopped being a flower market and was becoming a sort of, what it is today. And street entertainment was beginning to happen. And I used to go down there and watch street entertainment and wonder how did the entertainment industry work? I had no idea how it worked from the outside. How does it work? I haven't got a clue. And so I chatted up the street performers, and there was a dancer there called Patty Webb, who also was a fire eater, with a bloke called Mark Rowan, and they had a fire eating act that had a fan club. I mean, it wasn't just, light a fire rod, swallow it. It was a titanic struggle for the possession of fire. They used to do it in sort of discos and nightclubs and stuff. And Mark would drag Patty across the stage by her hair, and she'd jump on his back and ram fire rods down his throat. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go into the industry, these are people I need to talk to. So I went and knocked on the dressing room door and said, I'd like to talk to you about how... They said, do you drive? And I said, yes. I said, have you got a van? I said, I don't have a van, but I have access to a van, because by then I'd moved on from delivering parcels on a motorbike to delivering parcels in a van. And they said, well, you're now our roadie. And I roadied for them for about a year or so while I learned a bit about how the business worked. And so when it was time to sort of make that move, I got Patty to choreograph a 4-minute silent act for me. And they were doing It's now called Coco, but it was then called the Camden Palace. And it was another one of these discos. The big discotheque boom was on, and they had a gong show. So I went down and watched this gong show, and even the worst acts were given. That's where you come out and you do your act, and there's a compare, and if the audience start booing, they'll hook you off. And I thought, if I can take that without collapsing from a bag of nerves, I can give it a go. So we put a very simple 4-minute act together, which was dire, but I got into the final.
What was the act?
It was done to the soundtrack of Peter Skellen, Love is the Simplest Thing. Don't know why, but that's what we chose. I can still see Patty at the Erdang Institute, where we sort of borrowed a rehearsal room, going, "Don't sing! If you're ever doing anything with a vocal soundtrack, do not join in the words. It's not a good look." And I think I came out and I turned a silk scarf into a cane, and then I produced a clockwork wind-up dove from a dove box, and then I did a bit of dancing cane, and then I think I produced a dove pan. And
Where did the magic come from? Had you gone to a magic shop?
I'd gone to Davenport's.
Davenport's was your first point of call.
And I bumped into a bloke called Bobby Bernard, who said, "Don't even think about it." Was the advice he gave me. Don't even. And I thought, well, I'm not going to pay. I had done a little bit before. I had to give a talk on financial merchandising for the sales force that I was working in, and I thought, what would be interesting, because you had to find a little USP to do your talk with, and I thought I'll put some magic in. I won't tell anybody I'm doing magic. I won't do it as a magic act. But for instance, I mean, we didn't have the wonderful video, we call those those programs that you can put into the computer, and a PowerPoint. Didn't have a PowerPoint. If you wanted to do it, you had to create sort of, say, cards, which you would then put on an easel. And I thought, I'll put some facts on the front of a card, and then I'll turn it over, and there'll be some more facts on the back of it, and then I'll turn it over again, and there'll be another one there. And I won't say anything, but I'll just, and people went, "Did I see that?" and so I'd done a bit of magic for that, and that's probably why I steered into it.
So then, how do you go from having that 4-minute act to what you've become now, which is everyone calls the Queen of Close-Up?
Right. Well, while I was roadieing for Patty and Mark, one of the jobs was getting them out of the bar afterwards, which was quite important to me because I had to be at work at 9 o'clock the next morning, and they were unwinding, and so that, well, a couple of joints and a couple of pints, I suppose. But they had to unwind, and I thought, if I do this magic business, if I saw a man in half, because now I know I can get through the 4 minutes. I saw a man in half. I will be sitting in the bar afterwards, and someone will say, "Well, you're the magician, do something with that," and push a salt cellar across at me. So I thought, I better learn some silly little tricks to do while we're unwinding in the bar after my major stage act. And so I learnt some, a couple of little rope tricks and how to use the thumb tip. And before long, I found I was being invited to a lot of people's parties, and they were clapping. And I thought, if they can invite me and clap, they can pay. And so I found that I could earn a living much more easily from doing silly things at parties than I could from putting together. I had also. It all starts coming back. It was a long time ago now. I had been attending a sort of a discussion group, and the guy who led this discussion group, which was sort of in the 80s, you did that. You went to a discussion group. The guy ran had inherited a family shop fitting business, and it was going broke, and he was weeping into his gin and tonic at some stage, going, "I don't know, I've got all these people standing around, and I'm having to pay them to stand around." And I said, "Wow, if I supply you with some timber and some drawings, could they build me an illusion or two?" And he said, "Yes, of course they can." So I got some drawings for a thing by Robert Harmon called Out of This World. And I got him that. I thought we'd start with that one. I didn't know it was completely impractical, completely unperformable. And they built this most amazing bit of kit. And then the auditors moved in and said, what have these people been doing with all this stuff? Yeah, we can bill them. So I got a bill for 600 quid, which was an awful lot of money, which I didn't have. And I carried that debt around for a long time. And the Illusion sat in the garage unused for years. I think Anthony Owen wound up with it eventually. But so it was a combination of sort of seeing things develop and seeing things happen and going and taking the main chance. So I never really did become an illusionist, which was my plan. But I found I was being invited to a lot of parties. And society had changed an awful lot, and people were going out to dinner a lot more, and people were having house parties and things. And I suddenly realised that there was a market that hadn't existed. Close-up magic was a bloke called Rovey going around with a pack of cards at someone's party. And I found out that actually doing it over a dinner table was quite fun. And then a show called Y was starting at the Piccadilly Theatre with Arturo Brachetti in it. And they were papering this thing. I was beginning to get a bit interested in magic and trying to work out whether I was going to be an illusionist. And I found myself, because of the Covent Garden connection, people walking around with big handfuls of these papered tickets to go and see the show at the Piccadilly Theatre. And that made me quite popular with the fringes of the Magic Circle and stuff. And I used to go down there quite a lot. And I thought, we should be doing some of this stuff around the tables. The format for the show was a big Parisian type floor show, but done on a stage. And they had taken out all the seats in the theatre, in the foyer, in the stalls, and put in long dining tables. And then people would sit down and watch the show. Then they would serve food, and then they would have a sort of a late night cabaret going on. And I thought it would be good for people to go around the tables during the meal, so that people would then be tempted to stay on, and they would say. And I proposed this to the guy who was running it, and he said, yes, come in on a Saturday night and try it out. And I think I lasted about 4 weeks. And they sacked me because they said, no, we think magicians should be men. I don't know what was going on there. Arturo liked it. He was, he thought what I was out there with a strip of deck, a bit of rope, thumb tip. What else? I did almost nothing. But it was a very simple place because the market didn't exist. It wasn't at all sophisticated. And when I was sacked, all the girls who were dancers in this show, oh, never mind, love, they'd saw me. I was very upset. And they were all moonlighting at a club called the Gaslight round the corner, which was a clip joint. So I wound up going around this clip joint doing this stuff. And, of course, they were all sitting there in a piece of chiffon and a pair of knickers getting groped by businessmen. And me showing up at the table gave them 5 minutes off from the groping. So they'd nudge the client and go, give her a tip. And I came out of there with sort of 60 or 70 quid. I'd never seen so much money in one place. And it wasn't long before the owners of the club saw I was making a great deal in tips and decided that they would charge me rent, which is the way many of these, all the pole dancing clubs work. The girls pay an awful lot of rent, and then they keep a few quid at the end of the night. And the same thing was during the clip joint. The girls would pay rent to be able to sit there and con the boxes of chocolates and champagne out of these guys. And so they were going to charge me a rent. And I thought, no, I don't like that idea. And the Hippodrome was opening, and I went down and blagged my way in there. And I went up to Peter Stringfellow and I said, I can do this. And he said, Thursdays and Mondays, you're booked. And the rest was sort of history. And I had, I had a fairly sort of racy sort of costume. It was a tailcoat and white tie and fishnet tights, and I did look a bit hot, I have to say. And of course now you get very jealous of all the girls who've got long legs and nice tits, and they're getting the gigs that I should have been getting. But and then so.
How did the documentary come about that I think most people will remember from? Was it the early 90s that was made?
Yeah, it was a 40 minutes. I know all sorts of people were after me to make this documentary, and it was. I never saw it as a sort of way forward, but in the end, a very talented documentary maker called Sally George persuaded me that we should give it a go.
And you just met her at a gig, or?
Well, and I don't. Gosh, it was a long time ago now. I really can't remember how it all happened and where she came out of the woodwork. But I guess she probably saw me working at the Hippodrome or something. Or anyway, it was decided. And in the end, after a lot of pressure, I decided that I would go for it. It's really difficult, that sort of thing, because you have absolutely no control, and the only thing you can do is make sure that the people who are involved in it are on your side, and of course they'll tell you they're on your side and not. What was interesting was that having made it, I was doing a Red Cross benefit, and Diana was a big, patron of the Red Cross, and it was at one of their dues, and I'm standing at the back of the room because everybody else is trying to sort of be in the, I've met her once, twice, and suddenly there was this black-clad arm reached through the little group I was talking with, seized me by the shoulder and pulled me around and said, "Aren't you talking to me tonight, Fay?" And I said, "Well, ma'am, I'll talk to you any time you want, but you're busy." And she said no, and we spent about 10 or 15 minutes talking about documentary. And my niece was in the film, and she said, "Your niece is very special, isn't she?"
Sorry, so just to be clear, Princess Diana had seen your documentary?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
And, you realise how all these things begin to work then. I phoned up my niece, who was, I think she was 11 at the time, and I said, "Kate, Princess of Wales thinks you're a very special person." And I know what it feels. I know what an 11-year-old have. There was this sort of gasping silence coming from the other end of the telephone for about 5 minutes while she got her head round this. But no, what then happened was that Di made. It was about 2 or 3 months before she made the Martin Bashir piece, and she clearly needed to know how much control you would have, how you would deal with it, and that's what she needed to know. So yeah, we had quite a long chat about making films. And
you've done quite a lot of stuff for royalty over the years.
Yeah, there was a period of time when they liked me.
What are some of the sort of highlights of the things you've done for them?
I did the Queen's 80th birthday party at the Ritz recently. Di was a fan. I did 2 or 3 house parties for her. There was the Queen's cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson, used to run a company called Party Planners. It was quite interesting because when we started, everybody's got a clipboard now, but party planners didn't exist in the 80s. If you were going to organise a party, it was going to be round at your house, and you just invited a few friends round. And there were only about 4 companies that did party planners. There was a company called Banana Splits, there was one called Party Planners, there was another one called the Admirable Crichton, there were a couple of others. And if they liked you, you were never out of work. Well, now everybody's got their university degrees in it, and everybody's got a clipboard. But then, if you were in with those 5 companies, they'd love you, and So Liz Anson liked me, and she got because she was the Queen's cousin, she got the job of organising all of those parties, and one party spins on to another. Work begets work, and as I often say, it's if you have to work at TGI Fridays, work at TGI Fridays if you can't get anything else. But TGI Fridays will only spin off TGI Friday jobs, whereas a top restaurant will spin off top jobs, and so you've got to find your way as far up the food chain as you can, and you've got to keep working up that food chain until you reach your maximum potential. Then you will get the sort of work that you need. And
obviously some of what helps get you that work is a few TV appearances here and there. I remember you were on 1, 2, 3, I think it was. You're on Talking Telephone Numbers.
I did 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
That was ever so funny, that, because I didn't understand that programme at all. But when I was a motorcycle messenger, you used to long in the winter, you used to long for the parcel to be delayed or the letter to be delayed. And I had to go down to Yorkshire Television, it was snowing. And I walked into, you've got all the leathers, you've got, well, not leathers, I couldn't afford them. You're in the plastic outfit and you're muffled up to the eyeballs and you got snow on your helmet. And I walked up to the desk and said, I've come to this much. She said, it's going to be 5 minutes. And I thought, oh, glorious, I can thaw out. And the woman behind the desk said, excuse me, would you wait outside? You're dribbling on the carpet. And 6 months, I don't know how it was. It wasn't that long later. I was whisked in through the front doors from the we'll send a car for you to do this 3, 2, 1 thing. I had no clue what was going on, but it was the same woman behind the desk, which was nice. She didn't recognise me, but I recognised her, and I thought.
You also did Paul Daniels' Secrets.
That was a long time coming. I can understand the logic behind it, but Paul never put anybody from this country in his show if he could possibly help it. I think Billy McComb did it once, and somebody else, but he had very few British magicians on. Because possibly he was covering, I don't know, but it was, maybe it was an opportunity to show you what was going on abroad or whatever. But if you look at the list of people, there were very few. Secrets was his sort of last bash, and I did one of those. I did some TVAM because they did a piece on the Hippodrome as it was opening up, and I went back and did some stuff. And of course, because you're doing your royal party and stuff, it all spins off, and you become flavour of the month. I think I was responsible for them introducing the 4-second time delay, because Anne Diamond, who was the professional iceberg, was witnessing the rope trick, and at one point she went,
yeah.
And so they thought, well, if Anne Diamond is going to use some slightly strong language, we'd better put a delay in. So, and then from there I did a bit of Whack-A-Day with Timmy Mallet. But I didn't get much television. The television that I got lives in the mind still. I mean, a lot. Lenahan had a show. He gave me the nicest introduction it was possible to have.
I remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Isn't that?
I remember
you remember
it,
it lives in the mind. If you're in a restaurant and somebody comes to the table to do some magic,
you better hope it's Fay Presto. Because nobody does it better. That was what he said.
That was so kind and so generous.
Well, they shot you brilliantly that night as well. I think that's my favourite TV appearance of yours.
Yeah. I did I used to get little bits.
That was in Langhams?
Yeah, I think we did shoot it in Langhams. Yeah. Langhams was very reluctant to most restaurants are very reluctant to let the cameras in. You have to be very careful. Because, it's like I'm a member of Soho House now. And there's a no photographs rule in there, quite rightly too, because, somebody might be having a coffee with somebody they're not married to in the background, and suddenly, that bit of the photograph has been blown up and it's all over the press. So, top restaurants are very reluctant to let you film or take photographs. Not so much now, but then it was very forbidden. So getting footage out was quite tricky.
Is it fair to say that the highest profile TV thing you did was the documentary on CNN with Richard Quest? Bear in mind that was an international audience.
It went international.
You were featured with David Copperfield on that.
I mean, what a flattering bunch to be put in with. I mean, it was very flattering to be considered the kind of the close-up equivalent internationally of David Copperfield. It didn't spin off any work mind, but it was nice to have them put on the website.
But you were also portrayed as a slightly, I don't think you disagree, a slightly kind of more cynical magician to Copperfield in terms of you're in England and things are very different here from the glitzy stage of Vegas.
Well, English people don't like magic. Certainly they're liking it more, but I never used to use the M word. You go up to a table and say, "Hello, I'm the resident magician. Would you like to see some magic?" They say, "No, go away." And I never use the M word, and I never have used the M word, because it's like if you give 4 tickets to Disney World to an English couple, the first thing they go is, "Where can we borrow some children?" You give 4 tickets to Disney World to an American couple, and they go, "Oh, Bob and Janet next door would like to come." And English people think that the only way they can enjoy a magic show is to take the kids along. It's changed a bit for the moment. I mean, when I started, David Nixon had just died, and it was considered grown-up entertainment, and David Nixon was a very avuncular sort of chap and a wonderful man and it was an honour and privilege to be asked to come close and bear witness. And his little audience was always called the committee. And you are the committee who are the eyes of the audience, and you're here to make sure that nothing underhand is going on. But then it all got a bit sort of, I don't know, cheesy, maybe is the word. But English people, they're not mad on magic. They don't take to it, especially at that sort of black tie level. You have to be very careful how you introduce it. And there is this sort of, you have to prove, I don't know what it is, but you have to sneak it in. And once you've snuck it in, they have a wonderful time. It's the English child is so deeply buried within the English. I mean, there's a thing called transactional analysis, which is about the parent, the adult, and the child. We are three people. We have a bit of parent in us, we have an adult in us, and we have a child in us. And the adult is the rational bit that says, I won't do this because this will happen. And the parent says, you will not do that under any circumstances because I say so. And the child goes, I'll go, and let's have a go. And if you can hook that child out of the English persona, it's fabulous. You can kind of draw it out there. And they have a wonderful time. But it's very deeply buried, whereas in the American persona, you've only got to sneeze and it pops out. Only the Americans could invent Disney World. Only the Americans could be arrogant enough to think we'll build one in Paris.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship with the Magic Circle. I think it's a long relationship, first of all. You became a member...
I don't know how many years ago. They wouldn't admit women to start with. And of course, that was always, you were always invited onto television programmes to talk about the Magic Circle not admitting women. And I had and there were various people burning bras outside and dressing up as blokes and trying to sneak in and stuff. And my attitude was very different. My attitude was, if you are going to be an amateur, a gentleman's club with a mutual and amateur interest in magic, that's fine, I don't have a problem with it. If you are going to set yourself up as the arbiters of all that is right and proper in British magic, then you must open your doors. But eventually, I think they only opened their doors because they needed a new headquarters and it was going to be in Camden, and Camden wouldn't give them planning permission unless they turned around and said, we are an equal opportunities people. And I joined when I could. But I am still fighting this ghastly casual sexism that there is in magic. It is awful. This sort of... You flick through a copy of the Magic Circular and there are probably 100 pictures of people. And 97 of them will be blokes. And any picture of a woman is her sitting there going, oh, wow, oh, that's amazing, oh, that's terrific. Or doing pretty things, and I think that's good. You go on the web and someone's going, hi guys, and I go, sod off. And I'm always having to take people to task on it because girls need, for those, and at Champions of Magic show, we're all sort of, in the foyer, and the girls around me like a honeypot because it never occurred to them that they could do some magic. Easier now, but back then it was like unheard of.
So what's some of the highlights of your relationship with the Magic Circle? Would it be winning the Close-Up Magician of the Year, or?
Yeah, I suppose that was. I think technically I've won it a couple of times before, but they'd always chosen somebody else to take the position. I have a very difficult relationship with the Magic Circle. I want them to be better than they are. I want them to deserve their reputation. I want them to... They could be such a good club. Could be so fabulous. They need transparency in the people that they use and book. It shouldn't be, you kissed the right arse this week, you can be on the show. It should be much better than that. They could be brilliant. They could be wonderful. I think recently they've chosen to go back 20 years. And I do not have another 20 years to push the P up the mountain again. I felt I'd rolled a boulder up the hill and it was just beginning to look great. It was just young people were beginning to come. The average age of the people in the club room had dropped by about 1,000%. And it was just beginning to look good. And then suddenly it all turned around again. I thought, I haven't got the energy for this. So are there any highlights? Yeah, one or two, but very few, actually, from the circle. I loved the fish and chip suppers that we organised and the sort of the spontaneous late night catering and stuff. When it began to look like a club again, it began to look like something that existed for its members. And then the last elections, it all turned around and went backwards again. I just thought, I can't be asked.
So, happier things that are going on with you at the minute. Obviously, you're one of the featured performers on Champions of Magic.
Oh, isn't it fab?
So tell us a little bit how you got involved in the show and your...
Well, I don't really know how I got involved in the show. I had done a certain amount of work with John Vanderput, Piff the Magic Dragon. And he had done some work with Alex Jarrett, who is the producer and prime mover behind Champions of Magic. And when Piff got his break to go to Las Vegas, bless him, I think he said, he said to Alex, you should have a look at Fay and see if she could do something in your show. And so I got this phone call from Alex Jarrett, and John sent a little email, Alex, this is Fay, Fay, this is Alex, you should talk to each other, and we did. And Alex has given me a spot in the show, and I cherish it like you wouldn't believe. I am so pleased to be doing that. When I started in this business, the only way you could be a stage performer was to be a kids entertainer. And you would do hundreds and hundreds of kids parties, and every now and again, Alan Shaxson earned his living from doing kids entertaining and got cabaret spots when they were around, and that was the route. After the Hippodrome, you could earn your living from doing close-up magic and doing stage spots. I still think it's very difficult in this country to earn a living from... I don't think can it be done? Can you earn your living from doing stage magic? Does anybody? I don't know. Can you earn your living from just doing stage magic? I'd be surprised. Okay, yes, Derren Brown does. Oh yes, Dynamo does. Well, he does television magic. Troy does television magic. Is there anybody earning a full-time living from stage performances? Graham Dolly. Yeah, he does. And there are all those people doing cruising. Of course, there are all those people on cruise boats. But for them, it can be really difficult, can't it? Because you can get trapped in that queue. You get trapped on that roundabout. You can't get off it because everybody in England's forgotten who you are. And the cruise lines know that they've got you by the short and curly.
You've never done cruises?
I did one on the QE2 years and years ago before I was ready. And they seem very, I don't know, they just don't... I've sort of tried out for one or two of them, and they don't seem to understand what I do. I'd like to do one or two, but I wouldn't like to get on that... I wouldn't like to be on that treadmill. Some people live on boats exclusively. They let their house, they live on the boat all the time, and I wouldn't want to do that.
We've got to talk about a couple of your most famous tricks, and maybe there's some anecdotes to them, but there's a few in particular. Obviously, the one I hope you would agree you're most known for is bottle through table.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It is strange.
How long have you been doing it?
Well, I don't know. I was closing tables on cigarettes through a £1 coin.
Right.
I remember going, I think it was at Blackpool. I went to Blackpool. I'd never been to a magic convention. I thought magic conventions are going to be really exciting, aren't they? So I turned up wearing the full slap with the fishnets and the tailcoat and everything. I was very surprised to find everybody walking around in sort of shell suits. And there was this cluster around a stand, and I said, what's going on there? It seems, it's just cigarette through £1 coin. I thought that sounded interesting. And there was this bloke called Eddie Gibson demonstrating cigarette through £1 coin. I thought, that's amazing. I've got to buy that. And I used to close tables on that. And then I went off to an international convention in San Diego, an IBM convention. That was education, because you've been to a couple of IBM conventions and you think, well, these sort of, all right. But the Americans must show us how it's done, mustn't they? The Americans must be brilliant at this. So I went to this convention in San Diego, only to find out that they're just like British conventions. Every now and again there's somebody there who's really good, but most of it is dire. And as I was leaving the dealer's hall on the last day, I looked up, and on one of the shelves, I can almost see it now, was Norm Nielsen's bottle through table. And there was a picture of this bottle halfway through a table. And I thought, that's phenomenal. That must work better than the cigarette through £1 coin, which is a bit difficult for people at a table of 12 to see what's going on. And so I bought it, and I got it back to the hotel room, and I read the instructions. It's not going to work, is it? There's no way I can make that work, because table space in the West End of London is so expensive. You cannot sit down at the table, and the instructions say you must sit at the table, and you have somebody on your left and somebody on your right, and you wrap the bottle up in a piece of newspaper. They have newspapers in West End restaurants, and you I sat in the drawer for 6 months. And I suddenly, I can't remember, I was thinking about it, there must be something, and I suddenly worked out how it could be done. And, West End restaurants have nice stiffly starched napkins, and that would do instead of a newspaper. But most blokes can't do this trick. They have a problem. They don't even know they've got a problem. But my method requires you to kneel down in front of your customer, in front of your audience, and blokes can't do that. That means your eye line has to drop below theirs. And that puts you into in inverted commas, subservient position. And nobody had seen it. And it just took off. It was extraordinary. It was, I was known as the woman who pushes bottles through tables, and I was flown to New York at one stage to push a bottle through a table. I had memories of, they put us up in this hotel. The gig was in the St. Pierre Hotel, which is a very flash one on one side of Central Park. And we were put up in a sort of slightly third-class hotel on the other side. And I remember a limousine pulled up, and I was bundled into this limousine, and somebody thrust a tumbler full of brandy in my hand from the supply. I can't remember much of. Next thing I remember was being pushed up and down outside the hotel in a baggage trolley. What happened between those two times, I don't know. But it was quite interesting. It's such a silly trick. And yet, it's a feature. It is bizarre.
And I remember you telling me once, card on ceiling. You've had quite an adventurous relationship with that.
Yeah, it's
good and bad experiences with it, though. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. No, but it's one of those. The thing about magic is, or the thing about theatre is, there has to be danger in any performance. You do not go to the Grand Prix to see people win. You go to the Grand Prix to see people crash. And in any theatrical performance, there has to be an element of danger. There has to be
jeopardy.
Peril and jeopardy. Now, if you turn up at the table and you are perfect, the only jeopardy the audience can wish for is for you to fail. Now, that's okay. Loads of circus acts are built on the, trapeze acts and things are built on the premise that you might fail, and maybe the audience on a subconscious level wants you to fail. But I want to be in a position where the audience want me to win. And as Vanderput said to me once when I was sort of putting him in at the Criterion, which was a nice West End restaurant he used to went, I don't get it, he said. I go to the table, people want me to fail, and you go to the table and they want me to succeed. So it's only because I open myself to the possibility of failure. And so there has to be that element of the possibility of failure. Now, when I'm doing card on ceiling with my method, there's only about an 80% shot it's going to work.
And that's why I can't do it.
Exactly, you see. But you've got to open yourself up to the possibility that it might not.
It's right, though. It's the only trick, really, if you think about it, where you don't know if it's worked until the moment.
Well, isn't that...
All the other tricks, like the bottle, let's be honest, you know when that bottle is the other side of the table that the trick's done. But with the card...
Yeah, but when you've been asked to do it in the middle of a room that doesn't have any tables in, and you've used two waiters who are holding an enormous great big tray, and you've pushed it through that, or when you're doing a stage show and it suddenly occurs to you that it might be fun to lay somebody out on the grand piano that is accompanying you, and there's a girl in the audience who's a bit up for it, so we will break all my rules and invite somebody from the audience up and lay them on the grand piano and push the bottle. You still don't know whether it's going to work. You've got to get into a position where you're not sure if it's going to work, because then
didn't you do it? You told me once you did it for Prince Charles like 3 times.
5 times and still failed.
So that was throw it up, smash, pick up the cards, try again.
Oh no, the best one was when I put a show together called the Presto Pack, which was Richard McDougall, Fluky and me, and a pianist, brilliant pianist called Harry, who used to back us all, and we did this show at the Drill Hall, and it was great. I mean, it wasn't brilliant, but it could have been if only somebody had sort of gone, wow, that's great, let's run with that. Anyway, notwithstanding, we did 2 weeks at the Drill Hall, and the next gig was in Scotland. Stupid agent had booked us in to Dunfermline or somewhere up in Scotland the night after we closed, and I had no idea how we were going to get there. It was just like, how'd you do that? So I rented a rock and roll coach, which was going to cost me more than we were ever going to make from taking the show up to Scotland. And there'd been a guy in the front every night watching the show called Gary. He was about 15, and he knew more about our show than any of us did. And as we had this rock and roll coach with loads of room on it, it was suggested, I think Richard McDougall suggested we took Gary with us. So he was 15, so we phoned his mum and dad up and said, look, we're going to Scotland. Gary loves magic. Shall we take him with us? We'll make him our assistant stage manager. So, we all set off in this rock and roll coach, And we arrived and we looked at this theatre, and it was built in about 1700, and it had a fabulous big proscenium arch with what looked like a plywood base to it. So I threw a pack of cards up there. It was a hell of a throw, but I could just about hit it. And so we took the card down, and we were going to have an uplighter, so that it was going to close the show. And you throw the cards at the ceiling, and the card sticks there, and then the lights go down, and the uplighter comes up, and there's the card in the spotlight. And we kind of rehearsed it a couple of times. Took all the cards down, put the giraffes away, off went the show. We get to the end of the show, and I've got the card selected, and we've signed it, we've put it in the pack, I put it in the right place, and I threw the whole pack at the ceiling, and nothing. Richard's dying in the wind. Fluky is sort of a bit embarrassed. That's all right, it's not the first time it's failed, we'll have another go. So I get the pack again, chuck it at the ceiling, the elastic band breaks, all the cards fall all over the elastic band, they all fall all over the floor. They're all down in the audience, they're all over the stage, still nothing up there. Harry's running out of notes at the top of the piano, Richard's looking up the bus time, and Fluky's wondering if she can get the last train back to London, because it's all a bit embarrassing. But I'm down in the audience, I've gathered up all the cards, I've got most of them, I've got the card. I chuck the whole lot at the ceiling, and nothing comes down. And I look up, and the 2/3 of the pack that I've managed to scrape together are dangling from the elastic band on this proscenium arch, God knows how many feet up in the air. And I think, well, we've got to get down now, so we need a pole. Is there a pole anywhere? Now, Gary is in the wings. I don't know where he found it. He found a stage brace. And so there's this arm reaching on from the side of the theatre with a stage brace. Fantastic, we're saved. And you know the way a stage brace has got a sort of thumb screw in the middle so that you can extend the pole, extend it for its full length, and the stage brace has been in the theatre since 1760, and this is rusted solid. So I go, well, we need some gaffer tape. Of course we need some gaffer tape. Don't know where he's finding this, but the arm is sticking out through the wings with a roll of gaffer tape in it. So I start a pole up. From the bottom of a pole, you can't see how short of the ceiling you are, can you? You know, because if you're looking up a pole, you might be 6 inches away, you might be 6. The audience can see about 8 feet short, but I think I'm only about a foot short, so we need a chair. And I looked to the wings, and Gary has pushed out a chair. So I'm up on the chair with the pole, and I'm still short, and we need a ladder. The little Brago, we need a ladder. I need a ladder. That'll solve the problem. Is there a ladder anywhere? Now, we've locked all the giraffes away, and where Gary found this ladder, I don't know. But I look into the wings, and there is one of those A-frame ladders. And Gary's just pushed this out. So I get the ladder, and I erect it in the middle of the stage, and I'm wearing a sort of a major frock, and the hair is all up, and the heels are on, and I'm up this ladder. And I've got the pole. And if I stand astride the ladder at the top, and it's sort of rocking perilously towards the audience, I just managed to tap the pack of cards. The elastic band broke, the cards went everywhere. House lights go down, headlights come up. There's the card in the middle of a spotlight. But wow! And what a close to the show, if only you could do it. Yes, it's a dangerous trick, but you've got to do danger, because otherwise they won't love you enough, will they?
That's brilliant. I wonder if we can convince Alex to close Champions of Magic with that at the weekend.
No! It is perilous enough as it is.
Who's your favourite magician, Faye?
I don't know. I love Ben Hart.
Oh, I love Ben. Yeah, he's brilliant.
You've got to love Ben. You know, I love people like that.
We had a conversation, and we were having a conversation about young magicians who we think will be potentially the next Darren or Dynamo, and I said Ben. Do you agree?
No, Ben will be the first Ben Hart.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
but he's going to be a star, I think.
I would hope so. I've got a feeling he's too nice. He's very nice. Too nice. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. Like Darren, talented, wonderful, but they were looking for a bloke who didn't do magic but did very clever psychological things, and Darren was there. Yeah, I think he was their third choice. The first two fell at the first hurdle, and Darren was in the right place. When Dynamo came along, you say, oh, Dynamo. No, they were looking for a bloke who had that sort of street cred bit, and Dynamo was in the right place at the right time. and then try it. They look for a person, and then they find someone to fill that gap. I wish it was the other way round. I wish it was about this person is hugely talented, they should have the break. The business doesn't seem to work that way. It's a bit tragic, but when you've woken up to that, it actually makes your life a bit easier.
What's your favourite of a magic performance you've seen, a live one that stands out?
Still sticks in the mind.
Yeah, one
was Archero flying in Y, the first show that I ever did any magic in. First time I ever got paid for magic. It was way back at the beginning. And he used to make me cry every night. Because, look, if you could fly and you could get yourself 6 feet off the floor, would you be looking all po-faced and flying around the room looking as if you wouldn't, would you? You'd be going, wow, look at this, fantastic, you've got to enjoy this, it's brilliant. And, Archero came at it the other way. He came at it, he could fly, and he was having a wonderful time flying up into the corners of the proscenium arch, and he lost the power of flight. Oh, and we wept with him. And then, of course, all the music, it was beautifully staged, and the music helped and everything. But it was one of the most moving things I've ever seen. It was just the loss of that joy was amazing.
On Champions of Magic, you open the second half with a trick where you sit on the front step of the stage with a single spotlight and you do a rope trick with a little girl. How did that come about? Is it fair to say that's your favourite bit of what you do on Champions of Magic?
Yeah, I think it's a nice, really nice bit. I enjoyed it. The problem is that with magic, with all performances, you've got to cross that gap between the stage and the audience. Now, the traditional way of doing it is to pull a member of the audience up onto the stage, make an idiot of them, but, that's your way of doing it. But I, very early on, almost before I decided to come into the business, I went to see a show at the Sundance Studios in Hammersmith. It was alternative comedy or alternative whatever, and most people. And I can remember it. Lynn Thomas was on the bill. I was sitting with somebody who wasn't very secure in their own image, and Lynn Thomas came down into the audience and chose someone to come up on stage. And I felt the person sitting next to me lock. I felt them go, oh God, he's going to pick me. Because most people do not know that it is not a random process. The person in the audience is chosen very carefully. But most people do not know this. And their biggest fear is being picked on and dragged up on the stage. Now, if I felt it, the person on the other side of them felt it. The person on the other in front of them felt it. So all around the audience, there are these little pools of tension. Now, in actual fact, one of the favourite things I do is to produce a bottle of champagne and give it to a member of the audience. And you can feel the whole audience go, oh, we want to join in. And I do a champagne bottle. I ask if anybody's having a birthday today. And most people sit on their hands. And all right, this week. Now, in Croydon, I don't know how many people there were in the audience, 300 or 400 people. Apparently nobody had a birthday that week, or the week before. It's interesting that, isn't it? Then they start pointing at each other and go, no, I want somebody. Finally, somebody declares it's their birthday, and you produce a bottle of champagne and give it to them. You can feel them go, wow. Now, I wanted a device that would cross that divide between me and the audience without going into that tension. And so I decided, I don't know why, how, whenever, I decided it'd be fun to just sort of sit on the front of the stage with someone who has that kind of wonderful air of innocence and wonder. And it does several things. One, if you bring somebody out of the audience and you do something with them, mostly you're facing sideways. So you face sideways, you blend with the audience face sideways. The people at home see the people in the audience don't see that sense of wonder on the face of the person that you're doing the trick to. One of the big strengths of doing close-up magic at a round table is that everybody at the table sees everybody else at the table going, wow. And that feeds back. And it winds itself up into a whirlwind of wonder. So if you sit on the front of the stage, one, the kid feels safe. Their feet are near their mum and dad. They're not really on the stage, but they are on the stage. But they don't have to worry about, are my feet going to, am I standing in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And so, but more importantly, her face is locked on the audience. She's not looking at me, she's looking at the audience. And the audience can see that sense of wonder that slowly builds in the course of the trick. And that's very important. When we started Champions of Magic, I had 5 people round the round a sort of a mocked up table. And so if 2 of them weren't reacting, 3 of them would, and the audience would see that reaction. And I think that's one of the strengths of it. So yeah, it's a very favourite piece. I love doing it. I think it's a really nice device. Oh dear, there goes my mobile.
Must be a gig. I'm available. Just to let you know, I am available.
I'm so sorry.
And I'm half the price of you.
I don't even know who it is. We'll. Oh damn! I pressed answer. I meant to. I don't know. I'll phone them back in a minute and find out who it was. I do apologise. It's a great phone ring. Though.
Don't apologise.
I do apologise.
What's the best gig you ever did?
Oh Christ! I don't know. I loved the day I compared a show at the London Palladium. That was great. It was the first time anybody stuck a star on the door. You know. I've still got it. It was great. I don't know what the best gig is. The best gig is the last one. I love doing the Champions of Magic. I just love it. And you know when they I don't know. I don't know what the best gig I've ever done is. There have been a lot, and you do forget. I did one in Spencer House for Di, a Christmas party. Sting, I've done 2 or 3 for Sting. He's a lovely man, and Trudy, and they're just brilliant. I love going around their house and doing some stuff. I don't know.
What about the highest paid?
They're all about the same because you have a rate.
Right. Because you used to have management, or do you still have management who sort of takes care of it all for
It's
you?
really difficult. Everybody, oh wow, you're brilliant, and then you go, right, well, you're an agent. Oh yeah, you're brilliant. You're fantastic. Would you like to look after my book? Well, we're a bit busy at the moment. I don't know. Agents don't find you work. I don't think they ever did. And management aren't really interested until you can demonstrate that you're going to bring them in some serious money. I remember years ago, when I was looking for an agent, I was advised to go to a company called London Management and talk to a bloke called Kenny Earl. And I was sitting in reception, and the door opened, and he came down and we went in and sat in his office. And he said, well, how much do you get a show? And I said, I get £100 a night. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do with the 15 quid. And he was right. How much work do you do for 15 quid? I don't expect an agent to do very much for 15. If I find I'm like a few years ago, I realised I was putting about 11 grand into the office. I expect a bit of work for that. Don't you? If you're giving somebody 11 grand. But it's changed. You see, now you don't actually, in many ways, you don't need an agent. Because it's all done on the internet. If you wanted, I don't know, Lenny Henry's phone number to come and do a show for you, the only people who had access to Lenny Henry was Lenny Henry's agent and all the other agents. And they would have this big book called Show Call on their list, on their desk.
Who's your best friend in magic? You got a best friend?
Not anymore.
Someone who...
No, really not anymore.
No.
My best friend in magic used to be Richard Penner. And I don't know what happened. No idea what happened.
How about you?
I mean, Zap and I go back a long way. Yeah. He was so made up when he got his MIMC. And my best friend in magic is probably Zap. Because we'd known each other for... Jesus Christ, how long have we known each other? We must have known each other for 50 years. Certainly 45 years. I've known Zap for 45 years. And we go a long, long way back. And he was out there too. He was the other one who woke up to it. I think I think it's fair to say that he saw the possibilities that I was exploiting and started exploiting them too. There's a guy called Jerry Hart he lives in Germany now, but he was from America. And he came over and he was, again, nobody's heard of him. He's not there's several Jerry Harts, but this Jerry Hart, he was just a sort of an entertainer, a magician from California, Pennsylvania originally, and he sort of came to London and looked in at the Hippodrome because it was the only place he could find where there was a magician working on a regular basis, and he kind of reassured me that I was going in the right direction, and he was a big flamboyant character who wore funny clothes to work in. And it wasn't just a plain DJ. He reassured me that we were going the right way. We've been friends ever since.
Do you think that the internet has affected your business?
No, because all my business is repeat. I I've got quite a decent website. I think I can deliver everything that is on the website, but when you look at some people's websites, you think that's amazing, but you can't do that. All these pictures of people sort of with celebrities. Yeah, well, I've done this, but I've done that. But they happen to have been at an event at which that celebrity was. Now, I've been booked by, but I try not to be, I had a picture somewhere of me at a table, and there is Sting, Billy Connolly, Tom Hanks, and Dustin Hoffman, all at the same table. And I had been booked by Sting to do his party. It didn't happen to be a big charity event, but they happened to be. That's different.
What advice would you give a young magician who wants to be a professional close-up magician or a stage magician? What advice would you give them?
Perform. All this business sitting in your... I mean, all those crap shots on people in their bedrooms doing card tricks on the internet. What are you doing that for? Get out there. If you're any good, the audience will tell you. An audience cannot help but tell you. If they applaud enthusiastically, you're doing it right. If they're sort of, oh yeah, that was very good, you're doing it wrong. And an audience should be, one, they should be begging you to do more. And two, they should be applauding when you've done it. And then it's right. And how can you know if that's going to work if you don't go out and do it? But it's tough industry. I'm not saying it's tougher than anybody else's, but I think it's almost impossible to make a living from. Theatre is an industry of out of work people.
You were saying earlier you don't think there's that many magicians who are just full-time performers.
I don't know. I don't think there are. It'd be interesting to know. How many are there out there who are actually earning their living, bringing their kids out? I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have supported someone. I've only had to support me. I certainly couldn't have put kids through school on what I've earned. I haven't been very clever with money. I'm not very good with it. My admin is dreadful. But even so, I haven't seen enough of an income coming in to say, I got lucky with my house. I was lucky enough to take advantage of it. But so to new people coming into the business, give it a go. And you might get the break, you might get lucky, you might earn enough from it, but you probably won't. And be prepared to go somewhere else. But give it a shot, obviously. Give it a shot, give it your best. Be too disappointed if it doesn't work out exactly right. And maybe be prepared to go off in other directions.
Fay, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It's not as if it's not fun talking about yourself, is it?
Thanks very much to Fay Presto. If you haven't seen her perform before, I would recommend you do two things. Number one, go to YouTube and look up a TV show called Stuff the White Rabbit. It was on the BBC in the mid-90s. It was hosted by John Lenihan. In my opinion, it captures Fay's style and tricks better than any other TV show ever did. The second thing I'd recommend you do is check out the live show Champions of Magic. It's touring nationally at the moment through the rest of the autumn and into next spring as well, and features Fay on stage doing some of her signature pieces. Go to championsofmagic.co.uk for all the tour date and ticket information. Thanks very much for tuning in this week. I'll hope to see you again next week.